With this here, this ain't about being flashy. This is game day, son. It's only about one thing. Getting that W. That's the only thing that matters right now. Boy, you ready?
The past is the past, you know? It's a new day, bro.
I'ma put it on
my day.
You
gotta do it now.
Hey guys, welcome back to another Blindside Fantasy Football podcast. Matt couldn't make it tonight, probably out mourning the fact that his Vikings are probably moving on to their third quarterback in as many this season already. But we got Rob joining us tonight, so it's me and Rob. Rob, why don't you say hello?
Hey guys, happy to fill in for Matt here. Didn't give him the chance to gloat for beating me this week, but he'll have his chance Friday, I guess.
Yeah, it should be interesting having him back, especially after all the bashing we're going to do with him tonight. It'll be some fun times. But we're going to recap all the Week 6 games for you, kind of go over some waiver wire pickups, kind of a new little segment that we'll start having. We'll go over some waiver wire guys that should be owned in your league this week. And then, as always, take a couple Twitter questions. So let's jump into Bengals and Bills. Thad Lewis actually looked serviceable in this game, getting 3 total touchdowns, but ends up hurting his foot and prompting the Bills to go out and sign Matt Flynn, of all people. Still no timetable for E.J. Manuel, and Doug Marrone has announced that if healthy, Lewis is the starter. T.J. Graham looking to be, his favorite receiver, getting 6 targets, going 4 for 74, but, I mean, right now I think you want no part of this passing game in Buffalo. It's looking real ugly, especially if Matt Flynn gets in there. Once E.J. Manuel gets back, things are going to look a lot better, but it's not looking so good right now in Buffalo. Rob, what do you think about the passing game there in Buffalo?
I actually thought Thad Lewis filled in pretty good, for E.J. Manuel. He showed us what he can do on the ground with his rushing touchdown, and he was that athletic quarterback that they needed him to be. I don't think he's a fantasy starter by any means, but I thought he did a respectable job out there.
Yeah, it was respectable. It's just I'm just worried about other guys on that team. I mean, he's obviously looking to T.J. Graham, but I don't think you're looking to go out there and, like I said, we'll talk about waiver wire guys later, but you're not going out there and grabbing a guy like T.J. Graham. This is just going to hurt the value of guys like Stevie Johnson and Robert Woods. It's just not a good situation. But Spiller and Fred Jackson disappoint here too, just 10 carries apiece. Rob, I know you traded for Spiller, then traded him away in our home league, so I got to ask you, rest of the season, Spiller or Alfred Morris?
I got to go Morris, and I think a lot of people would agree just because, Spiller, when I got him, I was so excited. I was still in last year's Spiller mode, and then, this year he just hasn't been able to take off yet, and we're all waiting for that big game. It's not happening, and it's not looking like it's going to happen with the timeshare, and like you mentioned, the quarterback troubles aren't helping any bit. So for me, I couldn't get rid of him quick enough.
Yeah, like I said, he doesn't have that explosiveness, it feels, this year. He doesn't have that breakaway ability that he normally has. I mean, a couple of weeks ago we did see a long touchdown run, but other than that, we just really haven't seen it this year. A couple other guys I wanted to throw at you, Spiller or Giovanni Bernard?
As sad as it is, I got to say Gio. I think Gio has much more upside, as crazy as that is, but He's got the skills. I like Gio.
Yeah, it's another touchdown there. Another timeshare there with Cincinnati, but seems to still be getting more touches than C.J. Spiller has been getting. Another guy I just want to bring up because he had a pretty good game last night, Ryan Matthews or C.J. Spiller.
Here's probably where I draw the line. Here's where I would go Spiller. Not that Matthews' performance wasn't impressive, and he's got a good matchup coming up this week, so I don't know. Maybe this week it's pretty even, but rest of the season, I think I'm sticking with Spiller.
Yeah, Spiller's still hopefully he comes back to the guy he used to be, and I think you're still holding on to that. Matthews, we know what we have with Matthews, and it's not looking that great, except for this one good game, obviously, last night. And then, like you said, against the Jaguars coming up, he could have another nice game. But speaking of Giovanni Bernard, he finishes with 21 touches, kind of disappoints in the running game, 15 carries for 28 yards, but gets it done receiving, 6 for 72. PPR, he's just becoming a beast. He's getting a lot of receptions, a lot of receiving yards. Nice to kind of see him in that role in PPR leagues. Also nice to see A.J. Green finally come back in this game and be A.J. Green. 6 catches for 103 yards and a touchdown. Haven't seen that in a few weeks. So kind of nice to see A.J. Green come back here. Lions and Browns, Megatron played, but obviously did not look like Megatron in this game. Just 3 catches for 25 yards. Joseph Fourier, 3 touchdowns on 3 receptions for 34 yards. This was just nuts, complete nuts. He now has 5 touchdowns on the season with only 6 catches and only 9 targets.
Jeez.
Half of your targets are going for touchdowns. That's just crazy. Don't buy into this at all. Even in the last 2 games, he didn't have a single target. So this is, I guess if you're looking for a boom or bust guy, a guy for maybe a daily league where you're going to get him on the cheap and hope that he blows up for one of these games, then maybe. But regular starting lineups, you're still staying away from him. McGahee, I keep saying this. I've been saying this since he's been back. He still just looks like old man McGahee. 10 carries, 37 yards, just terrible yards per carry, not really getting it done there. Josh Gordon, he is getting it done, 7 catches for 126 yards. Jordan Cameron, I don't know if it's Whedon coming back and now he's looking at Gordon more or what it is, but 5 catches for 64 yards, and it really wasn't even that close because a lot of those numbers came in the junk time towards the end of the game. So I got to ask you, Rob, is he still a top 5 tight end for you?
I think he is. The athleticism's there. I think this might be Whedon just adjusting back in, feeling more comfortable with Gordon. I still have him as a top 5 tight end, but a few more performances like this, and I think that'll definitely be in jeopardy.
Yeah, it's one of those things where he's still a top 5 tight end, but it's getting a lot closer to those other guys. It's hard to jump guys like Vernon Davis maybe ahead of him or somebody like that, but they're getting a lot closer now, that's for sure.
And I think with Cameron, one thing he's showing us is that he's a little bit touchdown dependent. Those big yardage games aren't happening, the last couple games. So I think we're starting to see a little touchdown dependence out of him, with Whedon as your quarterback is a little concerning.
Yeah, actually, Whedon seems to be checking down a lot, it seems, because, this next guy that we have to talk about here, Chris Ogbenaya, pretty impressive in the receiving game. 7 catches for 61 yards on 12 targets. For a running back to get 12 targets, that's a guy to keep an eye on, especially in PPR leagues. But it's almost getting to that point where he's got to be a waiver wire pickup. What do you think about Silent G here?
I think it's worth a pickup, like you said. 12 targets, jeez. You can't expect that to happen every week, but even if he gets 75% of those, that's still a highly targeted running back. PPR leagues, I definitely agree, is worth putting on there. Standard leagues, I just don't believe in him enough. And if he's sitting behind McGahee, that tells you something.
Yeah, definitely. Raiders Chiefs, Charles, arguably the best running back in fantasy, just keeps it going. 22 carries for 78 yards rushing, another 5 for 50 receiving. Led the team in rushing and receiving. Dwayne Bowe, on the other hand, though, well, we need to just move on from Dwayne Bowe. 3 catches for 46 yards. I kind of mentioned, and I mentioned this in my upcoming Mary Cheat dump here, though, but Terrell Pryor, 60 rushing yards in this game. I'm going to name some running backs that he has more rushing yards than on the season. MJD, Trent Richardson, Ryan Matthews, Lamar Miller, Ray Rice, Stephen Ridley, Eddie Lacy, and Darren McFadden. That's an impressive list of running backs that a quarterback has more rushing yards than.
Yeah, that's nuts. If anybody called that before the season, they know their stuff, or they got really lucky, because nobody, I think, projected that.
That's over half a dozen running backs taken in probably the first through third rounds that a waiver wire quarterback now has more rushing yards than. That's just incredible. His passing game seems to be improving as well, even though it wasn't, on point in this game. But I have no problem moving forward having him as my quarterback 1. Those rushing yards are going to get you the fantasy points you need. I absolutely have no problem throwing with him as my quarterback. Rob, I gotta throw at you some numbers here from this game. Well, not from this game, but players in this game. If I told you player A has 399 receiving yards this year, 4 touchdowns, and almost 64 fantasy points, and player B has 60 less receiving yards, same touchdowns, and obviously has 6 less fantasy points, you'd want to go with player A there, right?
Of course.
obviously. I mean, the receiving yards, the touchdowns, all much better.
Yeah.
Player A is Denarius Moore, and player B there was Calvin Johnson.
Oh.
Denarius Moore has more receiving yards and the same touchdowns as Megatron this year. I mean, I think we talked about him last week, but he's a wide receiver too, with wide receiver 1 upside moving forward, I think. Has a touchdown in 4 of the 5 games he's played this year with Pryor. Just really getting it done. I think this is the week when he's on a bye, so you kind of go out and try to steal him away from the Denarius Moore owner if you can. What are your thoughts on Denarius Moore, Rob?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I like Moore. The comparison, Johnson's been a little hobbled. A healthy Johnson would hopefully outperform Darius Moore, and I think you'd agree with that. But yeah, with that said, I still think Moore is a great option right now. He obviously is developing a chemistry with Pryor, and he's definitely rosterable. I look at him now as you mentioned, a wide receiver 2, a great flex play if you can. But yeah, I'm definitely I'd be buying into him.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at it, but I think he's actually top 10 now in fantasy points for wide receivers. He's just really climbing up the charts and silently climbing up the charts. Not a lot of people talking about him, so I still think it's a guy that maybe you can get him on the cheap. Like I said, they're on their bye week this week, so now would be the time to really kind of get it done. Panthers-Vikings, Matt Castle really didn't do anything in this game to hold back Josh Freeman from taking over the job next week. It just really looks like that's where they're moving towards, and why not? The Vikings aren't getting anything done this year.
And if by not doing anything to hold him back you mean giving it to him on a silver platter, then yeah, he didn't do anything to hold him back.
Definitely. Just handing it right over to him. Hand him the keys to the truck and let him drive. Vikings here, though, they can't get anything. They get down early, abandon the run completely. Peterson finishing with just 10 carries. I'm not buying into Kyle Rudolph here with his 9 catches for 97 yards and a touchdown. A new quarterback coming in is going to have a new set of favorite receivers. So, if Josh Freeman comes in, you don't know what Rudolph's value is going to be. Obviously, with Matt Castle in there, you know what Rudolph can be. So I think Rudolph is a guy to keep an eye on if Castle somehow does retain the quarterback job, but doesn't look like that's happening anytime soon. Cam Newton in this game. This is what he does. He has slow starts at the beginning of the year and then finishes strong. Finishes this game with 3 passing touchdowns, another 30 yards rushing. Really just this is what he does every year. Starts off slow and then just really picks it up second half of the year. Late half of the first half of the year. It's what he does. So also just quick news here. Jonathan Stewart coming back this week. I think you got to sell on D'Angelo Williams. 17 carries here for 64 yards. How do you think the workload's going to be split here between Stewart and D'Angelo Williams once Stewart's back next week, Rob?
Well, I think if Stewart comes back next week, I don't think owners should expect a huge shift with the first week back. Coming back from that injury, he's going to need a little bit of time. I see over the next 2 to 3 weeks, I see it maybe a 60-40. I think D'Angelo's still going to retain the bulk, but it's going to be a much bigger timeshare. Not to mention you have to battle with Newton and Tolbert in there. Who Tolbert even looked, fairly impressive in his the different situations that they put him in. But I do think we will see a more of a 60-40 split over the next 2 to 3 weeks. I think you're right. This is the week to sell high, but I do think D'Angelo will get the bulk of the work next week if you have to roll with him.
Yeah, Tolbert just looked like a bowling ball in that game, just bouncing in there for touchdowns left and right.
Yeah.
He's that little third down back, get the short yardage, get the touchdown. So when you're already losing the touchdowns to Tolbert and now you're going to start losing carries to Stewart, you got to start to get worried a little bit about D'Angelo.
Yeah, we joked watching the game. It looked like he's been eating a little too much Twinkie sitting on the couch, and he's on the roster.
Tolbert's a big dude, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Wouldn't want to meet him in an alley. Steelers-Jets, for fantasy purposes, this was just an ugly, ugly game. Jets side, just nothing at fantasy relevance here. You got a 3-headed monster at running back. Geno performing like a rookie, and the wide receivers looking just meh. It's a mess there with at least in this game. Nothing really to report there. Did you have any takeaways from the Jets side of the ball in this game?
Not really, no. But I will say, Geno, he's having an up and down season if I've ever seen one, and he literally has a good game, bad game, good game, bad game. So if that's any indication, if he's going to be consistently inconsistent, maybe next game he'll have another good game, but it's just completely unpredictable at this point.
Yeah. I mean, it's great when he has those big games. He has had a couple of big games this year, but like you said, totally unpredictable. You can't even throw a dart at a dartboard and guess when he's gonna hit. But I'm a little disappointed in this game with Le'Veon Bell. I mean, the terrible yards per carry is almost expected because of that terrible Steelers offensive line that's just atrocious. It's just so bad. But I kind of expected a touchdown in this game. I was kind of banking on that in my projections, but through 2 games this year now, just 2.85 yards per carry. Going forward, is he a top 25 guy?
I think he is. I think, keep in mind this is only his second game back. I think we will see better of him. And I think the Jets are an underrated run defense. They have a great run defense. So I don't anticipate this lack of yards per carry continuing. 2.85 is miserable. I think we'll definitely see a bump. But you're right. There's some concerns on that Steelers O-line. But I still believe in him as a top 25 guy. But that's probably right about where I'd put him.
Yeah, he's starting to slip into that 25 to 30 range for me. Like I said, I think he's going to get a lot more touchdowns. I think he's going to kind of fill that Rashard Mendenhall role of years past, where you're getting that 60 to 70 yards, but almost banking on that touchdown. Just obviously didn't see it in this game.
And the one thing about him, Marcus, is that with all these running games going to a timeshare, it's a rare thing to have a guy that is going to be the dedicated running back, and that holds some value. And I think that's where most of his value is. But
yeah, just on being that bell cow back, that guy that is going to get 20 touches a game. There's obviously value there, and those guys should be rostered in every league. Antonio Brown, though, in this game too, getting a ton of work as he has these last few games. 9 catches for 86 yards. Has had 9 receptions or more in the last 3 games. Only 2 touchdowns on the year, but touchdowns have never really been his thing. Do you think he finishes a top 15 wide receiver this year? I mean, he's getting the volume of work. He's catching the balls. He just isn't getting the touchdowns. What do you think?
I think he does. And you hit it right on the head there when you said the only thing that's really missing is the touchdowns. And he never has been a touchdown guy, like you mentioned. And I think you were the one that actually told me some stats on his past. But I think the fact that he's the only guy there, Sanders is of course there, taking up a little bit. And, Roethlisberger loves to check down as well, so he might check down to Heath Miller a bit, taking some targets away. But I still do like Brown as a top 15 wideout.
Yeah, speaking of Heath Miller, this is the second straight game with at least 6 catches for at least 70 yards in both games, so he's definitely back to being Heath Miller of old. But, just going back to Antonio Brown there, if he's consistently getting you 8 or 9 points a game, a week, that will probably get him close to top 15 territory, even without the touchdowns. To give you an idea, I was looking up stats today, and Darren Sproles, a guy who's just had 1 big game, but other than that has had a bunch of 6 to 8 point games. Right now, he's the 13th overall running back in fantasy. So kind of surprising to see how if somebody is consistent like that, they do kind of climb up those boards and kind of get in that top 15 range. So definitely possible with Antonio Brown. Eagles-Bucks, Nick Foles, just wow. 296 yards passing, 3 passing touchdowns, another rushing touchdown. On the season, better completion percentage, better QBR, and better QB rating than Michael Vick. Has thrown more touchdowns than Vick on 61% less snaps. And to give you an idea, his next 5 games are against teams that have allowed 58 passing touchdowns in 28 games this year. And just give you a quick rundown, he faces the Cowboys, allowing over 23 points a game to quarterbacks, the Giants, averaging a little under 23 points a game, Raiders, allowing 17.5 to quarterbacks, Packers at 20.5, Redskins at over 19. That's just great matchup the next 5 weeks for him, the next 5 games. He is just, these defenses are terrible against the pass, and this is what the Eagles are going to have to do to stay in games, because of how bad their defense is. What are your thoughts on Nick Foles?
All I got to say is I was wrong. I made a bad call last week. Foles, I'm a Vic owner in a home league, and Foles was sitting there all week. Could have picked him up for $1, and I decided to go another route, and it didn't quite work out for me. So I was wrong about Foles. I saw the Tampa Bay defense that we saw kind of quiet Brady, and I didn't think that Foles could have this kind of game, but he proved me wrong, and the numbers speak for themselves. So my thought on Foles now is he's a must-add. He's depending on what you have, he's most likely not a QB1. He's most likely a guy that you might, like you mentioned, play the matchups the next 5 weeks, but depending on who your other quarterbacks are. But I definitely think he's worth a pickup.
Yeah, he's definitely going to cost you some fab budget this week, Rob. That's for sure. I mean, there's going to be some guys in our league putting claims on him. That's for sure. I'm one of them, and it's going to be a hefty one. So we'll see who wins out that bidding war. LaShawn McCoy though is just a beast in this game again. 25 carries, 116 yards rushing, 2 catches for 55 yards. I got to ask you, if we were drafting today, and you had the number 1 pick, Peterson, McCoy, Charles. Who are you taking at number 1 overall if you were drafting today?
This changed very recently for me, and it might be, a little reactionary. Last week, I most likely would have said Peterson, but this week, after watching some of the film, I got to say Charles, and it's because of the threat that he has in the passing game as well as the running game, and that he's the real only offensive weapon in Kansas City, a team that's now 5-0. Granted, I think their schedule's been not necessarily favorable, but it hasn't been the hardest of schedules. So I think we'll see what comes up. But I got to say right now, probably Charles.
Yeah, I was going to say Charles, I think, is past Peterson. I would probably still go McCoy just because I think McCoy's more apt to get those touchdowns. I do like how consistent Charles has been this year. He's obviously heavily involved in that receiving game now, just really getting it done on both sides of the ball. Like we mentioned earlier, just basically, rushing and receiving, leading the team this week. He's getting it done, but I think McCoy's touchdowns give him kind of that edge for me. And then Peterson, I think, as weird as this sounds, I think he would be falling to 3 now. It's weird to say Peterson down to 3, but if we were drafting today, I think that's where you got to have him.
Now, Marcus, what do you think? I mean, obviously our McCoy owners are starting McCoy, but what do you think about what Nick Foles does for McCoy as opposed to Vic?
I think it hurts him a little bit, obviously, because with a rushing quarterback, you're going to have a defense that's going to be spread out a little bit more, has to kind of stay at home and kind of, watch for the quarterback and see where he's going to go and what he's going to do, so it kind of keeps them on their heels a little bit. So I think it does hurt McCoy a little bit. But I think it gets him maybe a little bit more involved in the passing game. So I still think he takes a little bit of a knock, but not a big one for me. I think the way Foles has been running this offense, it'll give McCoy more scoring opportunities, so there's always that too. But it'll be interesting to see the next couple of weeks, and hopefully Foles is able to hold on to that starting job over Michael Vick. So Doug Martin in this game, just 16 for 67. I still think that there's better things ahead for him. It's the first game he's had this season with under 20 carries. I think that's where Shiano wants him to get at. That's the magic number for him, is getting him 20 carries, kind of taking the heat off of Mike Glennon. So I think that's going to change a little bit. Vincent Jackson in this game obviously explodes with no Mike Williams there. By the way, just Tim Wright, I'm not buying into this. I think that's just strictly of a case of no Mike Williams, so Glennon needed a second guy to throw to, and in this case it was Tim Wright and Vincent Jackson, obviously. So moving on to Packers-Ravens here. Torrey Smith just made us all look so bad in this game. I mean, if you told me that Flacco was going to throw for 342 yards, I would have said that Smith easily had 120. But, obviously he didn't. 1 catch for 12 yards. I had him at 6 this week. Rob, you had him at 10. Matt had him at 8. So we all had him as top 10 guys, and he just really, really disappointed in this game. He's been the model of consistency this year, so I'm not going to let this bother me if I'm a Torrey Smith owner. But it was just kind of unusual to see 342 yards and only 12 of them obviously going to Torrey. So Flacco had a nice game here. I had him 12th in our rankings, well ahead of obviously Rob and your Roethlisberger ranking. Yeah.
Not so good. Not so good.
Yeah, not so good. But Flacco did look good. 342 yards, 2 touchdowns. I know a lot of his receivers obviously had nice games here, but I'm not buying into any of his receivers not named Torrey Smith. I'm not buying any of them. What do you think of Flacco's performance and obviously Torrey Smith's dud of a performance.
It's shocking. It really is. Like you said, 342 yards. That's a solid day. And Torrey's lack of productivity. It's obviously not talent. This is a game I think I'm going to have to go back and watch to see what exactly what they were scheming for or what happened. But that never should happen. This is a fluke game. Like you said, keep your chips in Torrey Smith's basket, and he'll do good things for you.
Yeah, then just going back to Flacco, this was obviously his best game of the year. I'm not really buying into Flacco, obviously. I was just playing, it's more the matchup. You expected him to be behind, and at the end of the game he was, and that's why he was throwing so much.
Definitely.
Eddie Lacy, though, another nice game here. Still no touchdown, but they're definitely coming. Aaron Rodgers, I think you got to get a little worried about him. We have a question about him a little bit later on, so we'll touch on this a little bit more. But from week 3 on, he's the 23rd highest ranked quarterback. So that 23rd. That is like, if you weren't using names, if you weren't saying that this was Aaron Rodgers, typically the 23rd highest quarterback is on the waiver wire.
Now, does that include the bye week though?
That does include the bye week, yeah. So maybe that does change things a little bit.
But even still, with a bye week in a normal
still.
Aaron Rodgers year, he'd still be a top 10 guy.
Yeah, and then with Randall Cobb out 6 to 8 weeks, the fractured fibula, that's going to hurt him too a little bit. You're going to probably see more Jermichael Finley, more Jordy Nelson, but again, not really performing up to Aaron Rodgers' standards. And like I said, we got a question about this later, so we'll kind of go over it a little bit more in depth there. But Rams, Texans, TJ Yates comes in and doesn't exactly steal the spotlight from Matt Schaub after Schaub hurts his ankle here, but if you're the Texans, and who's your starter moving forward? Which one are you going with? I think this is kind of their opportunity to start moving forward and see what they have with TJ Yates.
Yeah, I think that's, unless they want to change, well, even with TJ Yates, maybe they should change their name to Pick Six. But I read some reports that even Vince Young shot out some tweets to try and get back as a part of this team. I don't know how valid that is. I don't know if there's any real substance to that, but I think he'd be a better option than what they have. I think a lot of people would be a better option, but I think they will move forward with Yates. Right now, that's all you can really believe at this point. But either way, it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, Vince Young, not a guy that obviously would have jumped out to me right away, but now that you mention it, that would be an interesting fit with them, especially with their running game. I think obviously neither one of these quarterbacks are fantasy relevant at all. I think they're going to kind of go back to the more ground and pound of the days of old, kind of take the ball out of the quarterback's hands, kind of give it off to Foster and Tate. And we kind of saw it a little bit in this game with Foster. 20 carries, 141 yards rushing, another 4 for 57 receiving. His last 3 games, 22, 11, and 19 fantasy points, at least 24 touches in all 3 of those games. Is he back to being a top 5 running back for you?
For me, he is, yeah. And I tend to react to previous games and immediate performances more than some analysts. But I think this is one example where I'm not overreacting, where he is back. He looks like Foster, and he's, like you mentioned, he's going to get the touches. So for me, I'm putting him right at 5.
Yeah, I was going to say he's top 5 for me again. I think he's back to the Arian Foster of old. I obviously didn't like him very much coming into the year, but he's kind of showed what I mentioned earlier in the year about him kind of slowing down, but he's picked things right back up again, so I'm back on the bandwagon with him. Zach Stacy, the other running back in this game, also looking kind of good as his second chance at being the lead back. 18 carries for 79 yards, another 2 for 11 receiving, so 20 total touches for him. Just nice to see from the rookie. Jaguars, Broncos. Thank God Matt isn't here today. I'm just thanking God that Matt isn't here, because if I have to hear any more about his love for Justin Blackmon and Noshawn Moreno, I'm pretty sure I'm going to puke. I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen. So I am just so happy that Matt couldn't make it today. Matt, I know you're probably listening in, and just know that I'm very, very happy that you couldn't make it tonight.
I think that's a man crush gone wild with Justin Blackmon and Noshawn Moreno. The way he was talking about Noshawn Moreno, he has him as one of the premier backs in the league, and I think he's good, but as good as Matt talks him up, I don't know.
I'm pretty sure that if Matt had the choice, he would definitely be the cream in that Oreo cookie threesome with Justin Blackmon and no Sean Marino. So, but another nice day here for Justin Blackmon. 14 receptions on 20 targets. Crazy 20 targets, 190 yards. Cecil Short's banged up, looking like he'll probably be back this week, but, the hopeless Jags are just going to be throwing a lot when they're down this year. Do you have Justin Blackmon as a top 20 receiver moving forward?
I have him right about there. I have him a little outside of my top 20 moving forward. I think, he's obviously the guy, and you can't deny the talent, but, the targets, I don't think he's going to be able to keep up. He's an injury risk himself. I know Cecil Shorts was the one that went down, but I think they're going to have to not rely on him as much, which is too bad because he's the only option really there besides MJD, who started to pick things up a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I have him right outside my top 20, but he's still he's a great wide receiver. If you got him off the wire, he's a great pickup for you. For me, he's just not a top 20 wideout for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I was going to say, I probably have him around the 25 to 27 range, and that's just because he has some terrible, terrible matchups coming up here. He's got a great matchup this week, obviously, against the Chargers, but after that, he plays against the 49ers, 11th best against opposing wide receivers. Then he gets the Titans, who are 3rd best, follows it up with the Cardinals, which means he'll have Patrick Peterson on him, and the 2nd-ranked pass defense, followed by the Texans, the 1st-ranked defense, the best defense against opposing wide receivers, plays them twice, and then he still gets to play the Browns and have Joe Hayden follow him all over the field. Browns the 4th best against opposing wide receivers. So quite a few games there against top 5 defenses, pass defenses, with some shutdown corners that are probably going to be following him all over the field. So I think either you sell high on him now or maybe after this week with the Chargers, because while I still think he'll be productive, I think he's going to kind of come down from, how he's been performing so far. MJD here finally gets, his 2nd rushing touchdown of the year. He looked good in this game, but, figures the 2 weeks that I benched him in our home league, the 2 weeks he gets touchdowns, just figures how that would be. Peyton Manning here had I'm going to say, quote-unquote, disappointing day, only 2 touchdowns, but no Sean Marino, obviously, as we mentioned, kind of picks up the slack, 3 rushing touchdowns in this game. But more importantly for me, 7 receptions on 10 targets. I've been a guy that's been down on no Sean Moreno, mainly because I didn't think he'd be getting the touches of those top-tier running backs. He wouldn't be getting the 20 touches a game. But, if he continues to get this kind of work in the passing game, I'll start to buy into him as a top 10 running back. Rob, do you have him top 10 moving forward? You think that's a little bit too high? I think
it's a little too high at this point. It's a young season, and I know we're 6 weeks in, but I think I need to see a little bit more consistency out of him in terms of where his scoring is coming from. The 3 rushing touchdowns, you obviously can't rely on that every week, but like you mentioned, the passing game, that's encouraging. I think he definitely has that upside to be a top 10. I wouldn't put him there quite yet, but he definitely has that upside.
Yeah, the touchdowns are keeping him way up there. 7 touchdowns in his 5, I think the 5 games this year that 6 games that they've played, but 7 touchdowns for him this year. So those touchdowns really kind of keeping him up there. So Titans Seahawks, Russell Wilson, 3rd straight game with 60+ rushing yards. I'm almost starting to buy into him as being a running quarterback again, but I'm just not quite there yet, just because it's only been the last couple games, and I guess I'd have to go back and look at the film a little bit more to see if they were design run plays or more scrambles. But Marshawn Lynch just being a beast in this game, leads the team in rushing and receiving. You got him. You're starting him, obviously. Titans offense, just a complete mess. Actually, I got to share the story real quick about, obviously, my fantasy team here and the home league that we talk about. I kind of tweeted out today some of my bust picks in that league. Everybody from MJD in the 2nd round to Matthews in the 3rd, Sproles in the 4th, Miles Austin in the 7th, Kaepernick in the 8th. And so I tweeted all that out, and I thought it was funny because I said some of my bust picks in the league and named all the rounds I took the guys in. And I actually had somebody tweet me back and say, well, at least you didn't take Chris Johnson and have him as a bust as well. And Rob's laughing because he knows that was my first round pick was Chris Johnson. But another terrible game for him. This right here, just 12 carries, 33 yards rushing, 5 of 6 games this year, under 10 fantasy points. I kind of wasn't. I told the guy I kind of wasn't considering him a bust yet. But I guess I might have to. I mean, is he now in that 15 to 20 running back range?
I think he is, yeah. And, it's funny because your first pick, they say, doesn't win you the draft, but it can lose it for you. And I think, Johnson might have put you in this boat with his lack of performance. But, yeah, I would put him in that 15 to 20 range, until he shows us more, which I think, looking at his schedule, I think that 15 to 20 range is right where he should be.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm probably more closer to the 15 range, but he's in there. He's, 16, 17, somewhere in there. Saints-Patriots, what a game this was. I mean, just an amazing comeback by the Patriots, and especially Tom Brady. But key takeaways I thought from the Patriots game, Stephen Ridley is obviously back. 20 carries, 96 yards, and 2 touchdowns, had another reception for 14 yards. We're a few weeks away from Shane Vereen coming back, so I think you can go ahead and safely drop LeGarrette Blount and Brandon Bolden. But, what are your thoughts? You still hold on to Blount or Bolden?
Bolden maybe. Blount just looked horrible to me. I think he had 7 for 9 or something like that, and he didn't look like he was running the ball very well at all. I was happy to see that amazing catch. I actually dealt Tompkins for Ellington today, and I think solely on that catch. I mean, granted, Tompkins has had some good games, but this was definitely a sell high. But yeah, I think Blount and Bolden. I think I would hold on to Bolden and drop Blount.
Yeah, for me, they're both droppable now. I think this can be Stephen Ridley's team again, and obviously when Shane Vereen gets back in a few weeks, it's going to be some of him too. But big news in this game was Jimmy Graham obviously leaving with his foot injury. Saints are being very vague about it. They're on a bye week this week, so we'll probably know more by the end of this week or beginning of next week, so I don't think you should panic yet. Then, as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, Darren Sproles, surprisingly the number 13 running back in fantasy, despite only having one big game this year and less than 30 rushing yards in every game this year. Cardinals 49ers, again, of course, guys like Colin Kaepernick, would have their second best week of the season and the week that I banish him to my bench. 180 yards passing to Vernon Davis. Not buying any of that at all either. I think they want to run the ball a lot, and that's kind of their focus now. Frank Gore, 25 carries, 101 yards, had 8 red zone carries. Go and get Gore. This is a guy that is getting a lot of work, doing very well with it, and is getting a lot of red zone carries and goal line carries, and I think he's going to outperform his value right now. Larry Fitzgerald, nice to see that he had a good day after, being real iffy to play. Most of it came in a long 75-yard touchdown, but just kind of nice to see Fitzgerald kind of get back in the groove of things. And then, obviously, as Rob just said, Andre Ellington, keep saying go out and get him. He's looking more and more like he's going to be the feature back, and, kind of looked at in this game. What were your thoughts in this game, Rob? Do you have anything you wanted to add?
The amount of work that Gore got, you mentioned the 25 for 101. I'd like to see if he can sustain that the rest of the year. I think that's a lot of carries for a 30-plus running back. So for me, I'm a little nervous for Gore, but obviously he's performing. He's even with the workload, he's shown he can handle it. I'm a little nervous for the long haul.
Yeah, he's definitely producing and getting it done. Redskins Cowboys, RG3, 77 rush yards in this game, but I don't. You can't come to expect this. He hasn't been rushing the ball at all this year. They've been kind of protecting him in that knee, so don't think this is a sign of things to come. Still wish that they used Alfred Morris a little bit more, in this game and on the season. 5 yards per carry he's averaging this year, so they need to use him a lot more than they've been using him. Miles Austin, to me, I think this guy is borderline droppable now. 0 receptions, 0 yards on 4 targets in his return. Played in 4 games this year, and his fantasy points have been 7, 3, 2, and 0. Actually has the lowest number of fantasy points this year out of all the Cowboys receivers, and that's including guys like Cole Beasley and Dwayne Harris. Rob, I mean, Miles Austin, droppable?
Yeah, it's sad to say. I mean, if you didn't take him in that 7th round, I probably would have taken him in that 8th round. So, it's a tough situation for him. But I think the play of Terrence Williams and the other wideouts there are kind of pushing him out. One thing to note this upcoming week will be that running back situation. There's a lot of talk about that. But yeah, I think Miles is most likely droppable at this point.
Yeah, like I said, it's not looking good. There's so many wide receivers that have been emerging this year that I think you can go out and get one of those guys and kind of stay away from the headache that is Miles Austin. There's just going to be so many games that he's either hurt and not playing in, or games that he will start, get hurt in, and then come out and kill you that way as well. So I just think he's a guy that you really just can't trust this year. It's too bad. He has a lot of talent and just can't ever seem to stay healthy and get it, put it all together. Chargers, Colts. When will everybody understand, like I've been saying, that Trent Richardson is just terrible? I mean, again, this is actually one that I wish Matt was here for, so I could just keep giving him crap for this, because Richardson is terrible. I mean, 10 for 40 here, now 9 straight games without going over 60 rushing yards. 60. That's incredible. 60. We're not talking 100. We're talking 60 yards, 9 straight games. He can't break through that. A guy that can, on the other hand, Ryan Matthews, 22 carries for 102 yards. Gets the Jaguars next week, so should have another nice day. But, I mean, when people like Ryan Matthews can consistently break 60 yards, and in this case 100, and Richardson can't, there's a problem there. Rob, what are your thoughts on Trent Richardson?
I think you got to start looking at the Browns now and saying, maybe that was a smart move. When they dealt him, everybody was, up in arms, but maybe they knew something. But, I think, as bad as he's doing and as terrible as he might be performing, I think the talent's there. I'm still looking at him as maybe a buy low. I don't think this will be the norm, but, it's sure starting to look like it is. So, proceed with caution with T-Rich, but I believe in the talent. And Matthews, as you mentioned, I think he's a good sell high. If not this week, I think you have another week to sell high on him. But he's finally looking like an NFL running back. So yeah, I think it's a good sell high.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like you said, I think Matthews is a sell high on this, or maybe if you wait one more week and get another good week out of him. But it's Ryan Matthews. He's not getting the red zone looks. He gets banged up a lot. Just get rid of him while you can. So waiver wire pickups, we want to go into this a little bit. Our writer every week, the Fantasy Football Jerk, at the FF Jerk on Twitter, kind of gives you your waiver wire pickups before anybody else does. Usually has them up on the website by Monday mornings, so even before the week is finished, he has all of his waiver wire guys up there and who you should take. So I thought it might be a good idea to kind of highlight a few of those guys each week. And we're going to start off this week with Nick Foles. I mean, I know we talked extensively about him a little bit earlier, but I think if you need a quarterback, he's got to be your number one waiver claim. Rob and I kind of talked to him about him a little earlier. My quarterback in our home league is Kaepernick. His is Michael Vick. If you got guys like that as your quarterback, I think this has to be your number one claim for you this week. I think we talked about Foles a little bit earlier, so I think that's all we really need to touch on here. But
before we move on, Marcus, just how much of your fab budget would you spend on Nick Foles, hypothetically, say if you were going after him tonight?
I see what you're doing there. I like it. Good job. Brandon Jacobs, David Wilson won't need surgery, but Brandon Jacobs obviously should be owned after his monster game he had Thursday night. Having a game in prime time like that where everybody got to see it is obviously going to cost you a little bit more to go out and get him this week. But, Wilson, like I said, not needing surgery, will be back in 3 to 4 weeks. Also, Andre Brown going to be back probably in about 3 weeks. So while Brandon Jacobs, you should own him. Don't go crazy on your fab budget on him. He does have a nice schedule, but you're only getting him for probably 3 weeks until Andre Brown and David Wilson and all those guys come back. And once they're back, those are going to be the featured guys, not Brandon Jacobs. What are your thoughts on Brandon Jacobs, Rob?
I agree. I think the Andre Brown call is interesting. I think this week and next week we'll see his ownership rise. But yeah, to be perfectly honest, I don't think I want any part of this running game with Brown and Wilson coming back around the same time and Jacobs having that big game. It's just too much uncertainty for me.
Yeah, but like I said, Brandon Jacobs more of a stopgap, more of a guy to cover you through the bye weeks if you need
Agreed,
a bye week filling guy. He'll be solid, but like we kind of talked about after that game Thursday night, leading into that game, he had more touches than yards. So this was just kind of an admiration that just isn't going to happen all the time. We're not going to see a lot of this moving forward, but he is going to get the touches, so he should be owned. Joseph Randle for the Cowboys here. Murray gets hurt, going to be out. Looks like at least 1 week, maybe more. But DeMarco Murray always gets banged up. Only played 13 games as a rookie, only 10 last year. Joseph Randle obviously is handcuffed, so I think he is a guy to go out there and own. Like I said, only going to be probably a 1 week guy, it sounds like, if that. But a guy that you should probably stash away for if DeMarco Murray gets hurt again. Do you have anything you want to add on Joseph Randle?
No, I think you pretty much hit it on the head. You definitely have the 1 week. You might have more, but I think it's looking like he's just that 1 week fill-in.
Yeah. Keenan Allen, a guy that I think is starting to become more and more interesting, seems to be the Chargers' main receiver that's emerging. 8, 17, and 16 fantasy points in the last 3 games, all of them with over 80 yards receiving. The last 2 games, over 100 yards and a touchdown in each of them. I think this is the guy you want if you're picking up a Chargers wide receiver.
Yeah, he's just a little bit on him. He's been incredible. I don't know if this is lightning in a bottle or what, but if he can keep this up, he is going to have a rookie of the year type season. So
I'll say this: I am buying into Keenan Allen a lot more than I was buying into Eddie Royal at the beginning of the year as the Chargers' main receiver.
Definitely.
Another guy I wanted to mention, Rob, you're going to have a lot to talk about here, so I'll swing it over to you. But Jordan Reed, tell us why we should be picking up Jordan Reed off the waiver wire.
So this would have been my bold call last week, and it probably wouldn't have come true. I mean, he had a 5 for 58 game, a decent game, but didn't get into the end zone like I would have predicted. But he's a young athletic tight end. He's really a bigger wide receiver. He's a little bit of a vulnerability in the blocking game, but his athleticism in the passing game makes up for it. I'm a big believer in Jordan Reed. I'm actually going to probably be rolling with him for at least the short term in one of my leagues. So I'd believe in him now. I'd stash him on your bench if you're relying on him as a starter like I am. You're taking a bigger gamble, but definitely a bench worthy backup tight end.
Yeah, redraft leagues obviously a little bit tougher for him, but dynasty leagues he should definitely be owned and stashed away because he will be something in the years to come, that's for sure.
Definitely.
But make sure to follow Rob and I on Twitter, me at Marcus Katkin, Rob at rdruin. Keep sending those questions to #BlindsidePod, or if you're not on Twitter, go ahead and hit us up at blindsidefootball.com and email us your questions. Matt, Rob, and I, obviously we live tweet every Sunday from noon until kickoff. Answering your start-sit questions, sending them to a #AskBlindside. We really like helping you guys out. We know you have some tough questions to make, some tough calls to make. You want to win your week, so make sure to hit us up on Twitter before kickoff on Sundays so we can help you out with your lineups. So getting into our questions for this week, our buddy Hank Drebin on Twitter asks, are any of these guys worth a pickup in a 12-team league? He's a Chris Johnson owner, and the guys he lists are Chris Abenaya, Roy Halou, Jonathan Stewart, Donald Brown, and then Sean Green. Are any of those guys ownable to you, Rob?
In a PPR, Obayana's worth a look. I'd say Halou potentially, but I don't think so.
Yeah, for me, I said Agbenaya just because he has been performing, and again in PPR, he's much more valuable. I think he is worth owning. Jonathan Stewart, if you want to take a flyer on a guy, kind of a lottery ticket, maybe just pick him up just to see what happens with that situation when he comes back. And then, depending on how your season is going, if you are making it into the playoffs somehow with Chris Johnson on your team, maybe pick up Sean Green just to stash away to kind of protect yourself in case something happens to Chris Johnson. He does get hurt. You'll have his handcuff for the playoffs. Nick Schlegel, at Nick Schlegel, asks, if the Packers bring Jake Stoneburner back, and actually they did, they brought him up off the practice squad, is he going to have any fantasy value with Randall Cobb's injury? And for those of you that don't know who Jake Stoneburner is, again, practice squad guy. He's a tight end, 6'3", 249 pounds, never played an NFL game. This is obviously for really, really, really deep leagues, 16-team leagues or teams with really big benches. I don't foresee him being any sort of fantasy relevance this year. I mean, I don't know how coming off the practice squad he will. I think it's going to be, like we said earlier, more Jordy Nelson, more Jermichael Finley, and then James Jones. But what are your thoughts? I
did read some things today that mentioned that Finley might actually be lined up as a receiver in some sets. So I think this is a stretch, like you mentioned, a really deep league, 24 teams. Those extremely long leagues. I think it's a really big stretch, and he's probably not worth an ad at this point.
Yeah, I read the same thing you did about Jermichael Finley lining up as a wide receiver, and this actually kind of backs up that story a little bit, because if you lose a wide receiver, you'd think that you'd bring a wide receiver up off your practice squad, not a tight end. So this is a little surprising that they brought a tight end up, unless they have plans for Jermichael Finley lining him up in the slot or lining him up outside or something like that. So I think it does help Jermichael Finley's value moving forward. So I think that's a guy to watch and kind of keep your eye on. And if you're like me, I own him and Charles Clay in a league. Normally I'd be rolling with Charles Clay, but I think because of this news, I am going to roll with Finley and just see how things go. Seth Carden at Seth_Carden on Twitter asks, "What's up with Aaron Rodgers?" That's the whole question. What's up with him? What is going on? And,
not a lot of detail there. Just
I think that's a great question. What is going on with Aaron Rodgers? Tell you the truth, I don't think Rob or I know exactly what's going on, but he's definitely been underperforming. Rob, do you know what's going on with Aaron Rodgers?
Maybe it's too many discount double check commercials or something. I don't know. Too many filming sessions. I don't know what it is, but there's obviously no need to panic. Obviously, his wide receivers going down this week might cause you to do so, but he's a stud quarterback. He'll land on his feet. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe too many commercials.
Yeah, it's probably a good call. It probably is those commercials. They'll get to you sometimes. Maybe he's becoming too much of a showboat there. A little too Hollywood. A little too good for those guys up in Green Bay to read the playbook. But I think that does it for this podcast. Rob, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, that's all. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Yeah, I just want to give a special thank you for Matt for not being here tonight again. I just loving that I don't have to listen to all that gloating and stuff. So thank you to Matt for not being here again.
You'll just have to wait till the next cast for that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to have him back and what he'll have to say to rebut this, because I'm sure he'll have something to say about all this. But we'll catch you guys on Friday after the Thursday games.
See ya.
Yo. Check it, it's my time. I'm rapping about Blindside, fantasy football podcast in this rhyme because they got me the inside scoop on Adrian Peterson. Yeah, he's that dude on Cam Newton. Yeah, they give me the news more on Megatron, Calvin Johnson if I stay tuned. On all quarterbacks, RG3 happens to be the fastest QB in the league. In fact, Colin Kaepernick is rider QB for them 49ers. It ain't hard to see, Some awesome people hosting Marcus Katkin and Matt Dugal. You should be joining. Skinny or fat, short or tall, anyone can tune in to Blindside Football. Have a try, dude. Listen on iTunes or blindsidefootball.com too.